Welcome to Conversations with Sarah. Today, I'm joined by Deb Gowen to have a conversation about healing modalities that use brainwaves. Welcome, Deb. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, what it is that you do?
Sure. Before I start, though, for the listeners, I'm here in the Boston area, and we've had tremendous amount of difficulty with our internet for the last 24 hours, especially, well, pretty much everybody. And we're having a heat wave, so have no idea if that's impacting internet. If you guys hear a momentary lapse or little glitches, forgive us, but we're going to do our best.
Yeah, hopefully we can power through.
Yes. So my name is Deb Gowen. I've been a nurse midwife for 36 years, attending births and mostly doing women's healthcare, including lots of gynecology. And before that, I had 20 years of various careers, mostly in the field of health. And all of that you can read about on my website, but I owned a macrobiotic sandwich business. I worked in health food stores. I was a teacher briefly, photographer for a while, and then had a calling for midwifery. My calling came out of being a child of the 60s and 70s. It came from politics, although many midwives' callings come from the impulse to be with babies. Mine came from the impulse to be with women during transitional times or times of vulnerability, to empower them to be who they fully could be.
So even healing, even in that environment as well.
Totally. Not just birth. Birth can be a very healing transition for many people. For many people. And my passion at first was to go into inner cities or the more vulnerable populations. And then soon found out that, of course, the privileged need help in their transitions as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't exclude women. Wealthy women, educated women are not excluded from having their own problems. We just don't see them as obviously. So then I realized I had to be with all women, not just the people who are designated vulnerable. Because in fact, from my political angle, all women have been vulnerable.
Yeah.
So that's how I backed into this. And then it didn't take very long. You can't be doing gynecology visits, pap smears, any kind of gynecology visits with women as well as birth without realizing that healthcare in and of itself can be traumatizing, but also everyone has micro and macro traumas. And we tend in our society to quantify or qualify that trauma. We tend to judge it. We tend to say, that's not very much. My passion grew for doing a different kind of work, which was, of course, something that could help them get through this and improve the quality of their lives. So I started to look for different modalities, but modalities that were in the line with midwifery. Midwifery's definition is to be with women. So I didn't want something to put me in the position of, I'm going to heal you now, I'm God. I wanted something that said, what can I do that supports this woman with the toolkit she has that doesn't require her to talk, and rehash everything and half the time leave traumatized again or re-traumatized. So about 20 years ago, I hit on something that was developed by a man named Arna Ranson, who's currently in Costa Rica teaching breathing workshops. And he developed something called Unlimited Body, which was brilliant for me. You put your hand on the tissue, you listen, and most of our opinions and modalities and traumas and judgments are encoded in our tissue. You know, all the talking doesn't always get to them. But Arna developed something that you would just listen with your hands, and when the tissue felt safe, it would move. And when it moved, when it moved again, like a frozen rabbit who starts to move again, things were released.
Yeah.
A sprained ankle wouldn't be sprained after an hour session. It would be better because all the tissue that froze during the sprain now moved again. And it could go back to its natural state of health. That was brilliant, and I did that for many years. I'm so grateful to him. With that, he had an adjunct therapy called creative questions. And that's where brains started to come in a different way.
Okay.
Because our brains are, they're like computers. If you tell them things, affirmations never worked for me and many people I know. But if you ask the brain things, it seeks answers. If you ask the brain, how can this be different? The brain starts looking for different.
Yeah.
Arna's questions, he actually has an app called Creative Questions. It's brilliant. So then I moved to Creative Questions, but it wasn't enough. And then neuroscience was really taking off, and we were seeing all kinds of research, preliminary and expert research on neuroscience. And I started in my practice to work with neurotransmitters to help people with mood disorders, to help them with sleep, to stay away from the pharmaceuticals, which can be helpful, but maybe not the first line all the time. So that's how I mean, that's my journey to this. And up until then, the best we had at a functional neuroscience-based modality was EMDR, rapid eye movement therapy, which is still brilliant, but it wasn't quick enough for me. I'm sort of a, let's just do it. You know, let's do it.
So you wanted something that was going to get you into the thick of it quicker.
EMDR is brilliant, and some people can get results in 2 or 3 sessions, but other times it takes longer. I used EMDR for a trauma I had. It was brilliant for me. When it was over, I could think of that situation and think, oh, that happened, with no heat, no reaction, no cortisol spike, no fight or flight. It's brilliant. I still recommend it for those that can find it. Most of the time it's insurance covered, so that's wonderful. But then I found access consciousness. Access consciousness also works with theta waves of the brain, which is what EMDR tends to do. And access consciousness combined theta wave therapy with questions. So it was perfect for me because I loved that questions. And they have wonderful tools. If you go to accessconsciousness.com, you can see facts and questions and lots of promos for taking classes, but I would argue that taking a bars class is worth it. Their premise is, what if you ask the brain, so it's similar to what I was learning, what else is possible? That's a tool of access. You just, what else is possible? You're in the middle of a traffic jam, you're starting to fret about maybe being late, and you just say, what else is possible? And the traffic clears and you get there on time, and it's like magic. So they have lots of questions, but they have a basic technique called access bars.
So the access bars, this is sort of the modality, one of the modalities that you're going to talk about, isn't it, that works with the brain waves. So please explain to me what that is, because I've really tried not to read all the information on your website, because I love to just hear it.
It's worth it. But access bars, so access consciousness is the bigger umbrella. That's about possibilities and being bigger and using all of the tools about choice, right? And how to use choice. And we think if we have more choice, we'll have more freedom, right? We always think, if I just had more choices, my life would be better. The reality is we create our choice by asking possibility questions and by disconnecting from our judgments and our opinions that narrow our choices. I mean, one simple thing is, you have blue hair. What if I looked at you and I thought blue is not her color? Right away, I've made a judgment that affects my choices in life. Because once I make a judgment, I have narrowed my choices. Now I can't appreciate the haircut, or we want to create more choice in the world, and we do that by disconnecting or letting go of all of our judgments. So how do we do that? The basic is an access bar session. Somebody lays down fully clothed on the table, on his or her back, and I just touch the head. 32 different points on the head, and each point on your head is related to opinions, places that you have judgments, past, present, future, encoded genetics, epigenetics, all on these little 32 points. And you're just laying there, chilling with your eyes closed, and I'm touching points. Certain points will bring up things for the person. The person might say, I can give an example. Somebody said, I just need to tell you, all I can picture is being in the kitchen when I was 16. I can hear the song playing. My sister was there. Well, how did she come to that from being on her head? But she was coming to see me for rosacea, red face. And what came out was, at that moment in time, her beautiful sister was hit by her dad. And she had rosacea from 16 on because she made a judgment then that if you're pretty, you might get hurt. And her face became red. After that session, her rosacea diminished.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because what I hold the philosophy that the body holds the trauma, that, you know, it communicates things to us through symptoms. That's one of the theories that I hold in my practice and the way that I work. And what I'm finding from
Yes,
the conversations is
yes,
there's so many modalities that this weaves through in one way or another. So to me, it's affirming, and it's fascinating as well. We can't all be wrong about the way that our body
we're not.
communicates these things.
In whatever modality we use, there'll be benefit. I mean, there's benefit. In my opinion, there's benefit whenever you can work through the body versus talk to the brain.
Mm.
The brain is encoded too deeply, and the brain is a crafty being. So if we can work through the body, we can find what piece of tissue. I mean, we have all of the sensory therapies. We have yoga and acupuncture, acupressure, cranial sacral, aromatherapy, right? We have biofeedback, music, massage therapy, all of the therapies you're speaking with people about. They're all sensory therapies. You know, we touch something, we hold something, we support something, which releases the body to speak to us in a different way. So often, right, people cry during their massages, or they recover a memory. If they don't feel safe, they won't tell their provider that they have the memory. They'll just apologize. I don't know why I'm weeping. Oh God, thank you for weeping, right?
Yeah.
And then the difference would be if that could go a little bit further and not just remind them of the memory, if we could go one step further and get rid of it.
Yeah.
And access bars.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's not just tapping back into the memory, it's being able to heal, is the word that I would use, heal the memory, or let go of the emotional attachment that is around that memory. I don't know what words your philosophy, your modality would use.
So I wouldn't use attachment, I would say reaction.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's less an attachment than it is a fight or flight reaction.
Yeah.
You know, so it looks like an attachment when people are talking, but really it's this reaction, and that's what we work with as well in access, but in the other modality, havening. We have a clearing statement in access, and it sounds like a bunch of jargon. We would ask, do you want to destroy and uncreate that? Okay. Not let it go. Destroy and uncreate it. And here's the statement: right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. It sounds like gobbledygook. That statement, there's even a website, theclearingstatement.com, that explains it. It's a shortcut phrase that says every place this is lodged in you, from the past, the present, the future, the point of creation, the point of destruction. Are you ready to let it go? And we add in all dimensions, past, present, and future, so that we can clear past and present. We can clear the past trauma of that particular topic. It's pretty wild, and it works effortlessly. And at the end of these 32 points in the head and doing this, the person gets up and feels so relaxed, as if they've had a massage. I mean, literally, they're like watery, rubbery body. Yeah. And all I've done is touch the head.
Yeah. It sounds exactly like the sort of a treatment that I would love to have. And I don't think it's something that's available here in England. It's not something I've ever heard of before.
Look it up. There's about 16,000, 20,000 practitioners all over the world.
Yeah.
It is in England.
Wow, amazing.
And it is in England. And access bars is something that can be taught in a day. Yeah. And I love teaching it, because if I can get two friends, or a couple of family members to take a class together, they can give each other access bars. Yeah. And just, what a gift. Once a week, you each get a session from each other. And if you did nothing else, you would be getting more and more relaxed, but you would be using the tools of access. Like, another question would be, what's right with this? You just ask them. You don't have to answer them. How does it get any better than this? The internet is down today. How does it get any better than this?
Yeah. And it's what I would call reframing. It's a reframing phrases. So again, it's that similarity in.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I would say is being curious about what's coming up for you. So just noticing a thing, and rather than attaching a judgment to it and then feeling away because you've decided a thing is a thing, just being curious, like, what's this about? What is this telling me? What do I need right now? How can I best support myself? But you do it in a different, it's a different way. It's a different way of questioning. So I'm fascinated.
So one of the
Tell me more.
one of the reasons in my modality, and because I've been working with people for 35 years, is I wouldn't ask a question, for instance, how do I best support myself? Because we people do blame and shame really well. So if I ask, how do I best support myself, and I can't immediately feel what's next, I go into either shame or self-blame. Often we do. So I'm trying to get out of shame and blame so that the questions are what do I need? For instance, somebody asked me what I needed at any given point in my life, I would freeze based on who I was growing up. To ask me what I needed would be such a traumatizing question for me. I couldn't, you'd lose me, right? Because again, I'm failing. The same thing, which is being curious, but asking the universe in a broader way and you're part of the universe, obviously, but in a broader way that pretty much doesn't open a door for shame or blame.
Yeah, but that's really interesting because I've not thought about it that way. Because of course, I've been on my journey and I've got to a place where those questions for me are okay. That I personally, for me, they're an okay question. I don't go into that state. So that's a really useful learning for me to consider that actually that might be not a great question for every person that I work with.
It could be very advanced question for some people. They would need to be really differently on their path, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, so maybe, you might just be curious in a different way, not what do I need, but what can I receive today? Or what's going to be given to me? Or even that, if somebody can't receive, that's a challenging question. It's a tricky world, this neuroscience world.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is, it's noticing your reaction to the question, isn't it, as well? And trying, like you said, that blame and shame, noticing if that's what's coming up for you and how you can work in kindness with that to step out of that. So I suppose it's very easy when we're practitioners and when we've got to a stage of our own self-development to forget the stages we were at before.
It can be. So one of the tools of access, looks like we're going to be talking about access a lot.
That's fine.
Access is when you said it can be very easy to forget where we were. Remember the statement you just said?
Yeah.
In access, I would be saying, interesting point of view, Sarah.
Yeah.
Interesting point of view, because what you just said sounds like a opinion and a judgment. And so interesting point of view is another thing to say. Whenever you hear people say something like that I'm saying that's an opinion, or I used that tool probably 25 times a day when I first used Access. I had so many points of view.
Yeah.
Every single thing I did, I'd be like, interesting point of view, Deb, interesting point of view, Deb, because I was limiting myself at every turn by my points of view that I didn't even realize I had till I was aware. Have fun with it today, Sarah. Every time, all through the day, hear what you're saying and think, interesting point of view,
I mean, it is, but it's that statement came from, of course, I'd not considered that how that question could be for someone else. And it's like, because there would have been a time in my life that I would have gone, I don't know what I need, and that would have really impacted me. Whereas now I'm much more, okay, maybe I don't know what I need today, and that's okay. I'll just go with whatever comes along. So it's
and I would say we practitioners attract those that need us anyway. Yeah. So chances are we're not going to attract people who aren't going to benefit from exactly who we are in our states of our lives as practitioners, Yeah. So at the beginning, you would have attracted a different clientele than you do now. Same with me. I'm getting people now who I think, really, they want me to work with that?
Yeah.
How am I going to do that? That's a big one. But Access Bars takes care of it. Look, you can go on the Access site. You can find practitioners. Consider taking a class. Your life will never be the same. It's fun. You'll enjoy having it as a fun modality. Access Bars is done better in person, in my opinion, because the body loves touch.
Yeah.
I know some people do it remotely. This is a modality. I only use it remotely with people who've had sessions with me. And then I just imagine my hands on their head. They lay down. I can envision where I am on their head. They get the same results. We do it over Zoom. But best in real life.
Yeah. And what sort of results do you see in your sessions? What are the things that you're experiencing?
So many things. I'll tell you a really interesting one. There's so many. I'm a passionate storyteller. I want to tell you 17 million things. But one that was interesting is a woman had access bars wherever she came from, different part of the country. She came to Harvard to get a teaching position. She moved her whole family here. And when she got here, they weren't giving her the title, you know, adjunct professor or whatever they promised her. So she was doing the work without the title, and it was bugging her. And it was bugging her enough that she was ready to leave the job, and she's just something about wanting that title. So she came for a session to sort of clear out her garbage to see if she could get clear. And during the session, let me back up a minute. Occasionally we providers who work with people long enough start to get impressions. So in this session, I happened to just get an impression, and I would say it came from her subconscious, of a maternal grandfather, Eastern Europe, who lost everything. So I asked, does that have any meaning for you? And it turned out that her maternal grandfather in Poland lost all of his property, all of his land, everything he ever owned because he couldn't find the title. So here she is, needing that title. It was life or death for her to get this title. And it was an epigenetics. It was a past that's come all the way through, that titles are really important. All we had to do was destroy and uncreate it, past, present, and future. She got off the table. The title wasn't as important. She could more clearly think about the job if she really wanted it. And it had nothing to do with the title again. So that seems small, but if you've moved your whole family and you're feeling unreasonably, in your opinion, distracted by this title, and then it's gone, you can so much more clearly think.
Yeah. And it sounds just wild that could be the thing, that like it's just like something generational. That's
right. So that's a generational story, and that can happen. And once she fixes that for her past, her future, her children don't have to deal with that and many other generational. So there's many generational things that come up in this work as in other work. But on a more practical level, so many things. I don't even know where to begin, but somebody will come in, and I had one client who just couldn't, every time she found a guy, it turned out the guy was unavailable for some reason, like just one after another after another. And during the session, it came out that her dad had died, and she was really thinking fondly of his cronies, you know, all the guys, her dad's friends that were of a generation that was so lovely. But what came out was who she was modeling, who she wanted on, was these unavailable men.
Right.
Even though it wasn't conscious. These men were all married men that she loved, that were lovely, you know, this whole generation. As soon as we destroyed and created her attachment to them in particular, like, I don't know how to explain it any more clearly, but she was just modeling, we all do. I just like my brother's friend or whatever, right? You don't know anything about your brother's friend except he's cute and he has a job, you know. But within 6 weeks, she had a boyfriend. She's still with him 6 years later. So that changed her whole life. Another woman came in, sort of unhappy about her job. Within a session, she went home. She quit her job that week, bravely.
It sounds like it can be used for just so many different things.
All the good modalities can be used on every level. It's part of the modality, but it's also part of the practitioner. So a gifted massage therapist should be able to bring out things in her client, not just physical relaxation.
Oh yeah. I agree with you, but there are some schools of thought that it should be very niche and it should be very locked down into, you know, a particular client type. I love the idea of being able to work with many people on many things and, you know, kind of anyone that wants to work with you, that you're going to add value to their life in some way. That's an important thing, isn't it? And also what I'm thinking is some of the results that you've said, like, it sounds like that's very, you know, within sessions, if not one session, you can see really quick change.
Many people will, you know, when you go to a chiropractor or anybody, often it's acupuncture, it's a series of sessions that you sign up for because you know that it builds upon each other. And so I do have people who book for a series of 3 or 5 or 10, and they take them when they need them. But I do standalones because some people just come for buff and polish, once in a while they just come in, they want to clear out some debris. Because as I said, the points are all the thoughts, the ideas, the beliefs, the emotions, the learnings, and you just don't know what's coming up. Someone's closing on her house and she's like, can I just come in for a quick session, because she's not sure of what might be clouding her judgment this topic about changing homes. And so she comes in and we just go through a session, and at the end she has some clarity. Or oftentimes, though, it's very physical. People will have a twitch, and the place that was broken 12 years ago that always has an ache is no longer aching, because the topic that was in that broken arm is gone. So that's access. It's wonderful, and there are practitioners all over the world. You don't have to be deprived.
I'm gonna have a look, because most of the things that I've spoken about has been in my awareness, if not something that I'm particularly interested in or trained in. So this is just so new to me that I genuinely did not think that it was something that was available to us here. So I'm excited to know that it is.
So there's, just look online, there's tons of free, wonderful things that you can access. And then Access Bars is the foundational course, but then you can go on to 3-day courses. There's tons of them. And there's something called Access Facelift, for instance. I give people just hands-on access on their face. Before and after pictures are remarkable, but even that's therapeutic. So I moved on, and 2 years ago was exposed to something called havening techniques. Access uses theta waves, and by the way, there's a video online for Access that shows your brain. It's a white paper. It shows what happens to your brain during Access. So they actually even have some visuals there. And that was great, but I still hadn't found something that really cut to the chase of deep trauma where quicker, and havening techniques is delta waves. So delta waves is even deeper in the brain, and delta waves is where you're going way deep in, so that your waves are low and trauma can be accessed there. That's what EMDR will use, theta and delta. So havening techniques, before I describe it more, what's beautiful about havening techniques is that you can also find online free videos by havening practitioners that show people how to self-haven. So self-havening, which is invaluable because some people use tapping to calm down, change things, or whatever. Self-havening is touch therapy that stimulates delta waves. So you can use it, people can use it to calm down, people can use it to create space and change in their lives. And I love that too. I want these things to be accessible to people. Havening practitioners are also all over the world, and in fact, densely concentrated in UK and Ireland, So they're everywhere. And havening can be done online easily. Some of the more brilliant haveners are mostly just online these days, and seeks to create a state where we get back into the wide open amygdala where the chemicals are being secreted, and we neutralize those chemicals during the session. And after that, there's no hook. You're never going to experience it again. So
it sounds like it's a reset, to use one of the words that you've used before.
And it's done in a way that it's done with touch, stroking the arms. It's very sensory, right? That stimulates. When you stroking the face, stroking the hands, this, if you notice, when people are touching themselves, they calm down. Babies calm down. Everyone calms down. Well, this starts to get your delta waves going. And in that state, we can ask the client to tell the memory, and we'll give it a number. Like someone recently was seeing me for pretty big trauma, and it was a 10. I mean, she could barely talk about it without starting to cry. So if somebody can't be touched, they can touch themselves, or I can do it. And it's it's a 9 or a 10, and we start to do havening techniques, talk about the word that most identifies that trauma, whether it's shame, fear, whatever the word is, and they say the word repeatedly. Very easy, they're not having to think about it. And then we do some distraction for the brain. Sing a song, count backwards. While the brain's distracted, the chemicals are dripping. We go back to the memory, we distract the brain, we drip some chemicals. And by the end of one session, often the 10 is down at a 2 level or a 3 level or gone.
Yeah.
Changing that person's life, you know how it is. If you can just, especially with triggers that aren't even conscious, you don't know why every time you go over a bridge, you're scared. You don't have any memory that makes you scared. Or every time you see waves, you get scared. You don't want to be in the waves are scary. So for those kinds of things, it changes everyone's life.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of all of these different modalities, that is that for clients, potential clients, there's something, whatever, if you don't want to sit and talk in therapy, if that's not the outlet that you need, there is something else. There's always something else that you can go and tap in. And that's one of the reasons that I'm doing the podcast, because this is my field and there's still things that I have never heard of. So as a person in the street going, I could really do with some support to deal with my thing, where do I look? It's massive. And not all of these modalities are out there for people to just go, oh, so being able to hear, like, essentially touch and picking a word can completely change the way your body reacts to or deals with a situation is phenomenal. Like, you don't have to spend 7 years in therapy. You could go and try this. 7 years in therapy might be what you need, but this also might work as well.
And a word about that, in the States, therapy often is covered by insurance. So people choose what they think they can afford based on insurance versus none. And I would maintain that it doesn't matter if insurance covers 7 years of therapy. What your goal is to get back to your state of health. And all of these are presuming that your body always seeks a state of health, that your mind seeks quiet, and that your adrenal glands will love you if you stop doing fight or flight all the time. So the $150 or $200 that a provider would charge for a session, if you could get that kind of results, if you could sleep better that night. I mean, I just saw someone who hasn't slept through the night in 11 years. 11 years. Yeah. She's had sleep apnea machines. She's had appliances. For her to sleep 6 hours in a row was remarkable.
Yeah.
And a blessing. A word about trauma, because people listening may think they don't have something, or they have reactions and they don't have any story to go with them. I would advise listening to your reactions, seeing if you're responding to something or reacting to something. If you feel like you're responding to something, you're cool. But when you feel like you're having a reaction, a pretty strong reaction, either positive or negative, like it's a driven thing that happens all the time, there is an encoded problem there.
And I use different language, but I would completely agree with what you're saying.
And 2 people can witness a fire. 2 10-year-old or 6-year-olds can witness a fire. Oh, in trauma, let me back up again. In Havening, we speak about trauma being encoded first, second, or third hand. It doesn't have to be first hand. So children who watched 9/11 in this country, or children whose parents were in a war and heard stories all about Auschwitz, or they can have encoded trauma even though they never were there. So be gentle with yourself and know that you could have experienced it in an otherwise what you would consider to be well-adjusted, happy life. There could be things in you that are reacting based on second and third hand. Trauma in Havening comes from 4 factors. One is an event. The event has to be disturbing in some way. Witnessing a fire, seeing a dead animal, hearing a story. The event has to have meaning, some sort of meaning for you to have it even be able to be traumatized. So a dead animal, worst, whatever. Then you have to have your psychological landscape. So if the person is in a vulnerable state versus a resilient state. So a vulnerable state comes from so many things, as we know. It can come from anything. I mean, poverty, a lack of understanding of the situation. A resilient state, somebody bounces back pretty fast to begin with. So you have that going on. Neither vulnerable landscapes are no reason for feeling shameful. Vulnerable landscapes are no reason for feeling self-blame. I just really need to emphasize this. Anybody listening, please, 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 please ask yourself to let go of that self-talk and then find a practitioner. And then, so you have the event, you have the landscape, you have the meaning. And then the last piece is the feeling of whether or not you can escape. So if two kids see a dead animal or a fire, all of these things being equal, if one of them feels that he or she can walk away or escape the situation, it won't encode as trauma.
Okay.
It's the inevitability, the inescapability. The person of us have been in positions where we can't escape the storytelling. The grandmother telling us this story, we can't escape it. We get traumatized versus the kids who, for some reason, the story starts and they're like, oh, I've heard this, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And they walk away. So in havening, we look at all of that. We put it together. We do the technique. We give it a number. This is for event havening. We give the event a number. We do some havening. It gets another number. For most people, the number goes down very dramatically. That's why havening.
Yeah. It sounds so interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot more that you can tell me. However,
yes.
I am seeing the time, and it is time to bring it to a close, if that's okay.
Sorry, everybody. I'm very passionate about these things.
It's brilliant. I mean, I love it, and I can listen to these things all day, because it helps me inform my practice. It helps me consider things I hadn't considered before. It opens my mind to other possibilities, and that is something that I love. I love that. I love being able to question myself in the way that I work. I think it's really, really a helpful thing to do. So thank you for coming on and sharing your therapies and your experiences with me. Is there anything you want to leave people with? Is there anything that we haven't said that you feel you need to say?
No, I think I've talked quite a bit. You can go to debgowen.com. You can go to accessconsciousness.com or havening.org for more information.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with me today. And thank you to those that have listened. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To connect, find out more about me and my guests, follow SRTT Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And I'll be back next Wednesday with a new guest. Until then, stay curious and be kind to yourself.